Tucker Peck, welcome to the Metagame.
Thank you.
You're an advanced meditator, you're a meditation teacher, and you're also a practicing clinical psychologist, which I think is a unique position. What's a special thing that happens at the intersection of those two worlds that maybe you have a better insight into than most people?
Yeah. The terminology I've been using recently is thinking about the path of being nobody. And Dharma spirituality is largely about the path of being nobody, right? Transcending the ego, transcending duality. Psychology is about the path of being somebody. So if your therapist says you have a strong ego, that's a compliment. And if your Dharma teacher says you have a strong ego, that's an insult.
Right.
And I think that what I've been doing is trying to add or mix these paths together.
So like building up the ego and letting it go in some sort of balanced manner?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of saying it. That there are people whose egos are unhealthy enough that it's really not safe to transcend the egos. I've seen that a few times where people can basically get to this state where they are enlightened for a few hours and then insane for a few hours, and then where basically the ego is a mess and you can get temporary relief from it and then crash right back down into it. So there are people who are in a kind of state where they really shouldn't be doing transcendent practices. For at least most of the people I know, it's not that severe. But the path of being somebody and path of being nobody should be woven together. As in, if all you're cultivating is loving kindness and non-self, you're a very easy person to take advantage of. Right? My first teacher was Sharon Salzberg, and she's been telling this story for 50 years, where she's in India on a metta retreat, and she's coming back from town, and a man tries to kidnap her.
Whoa.
And she's holding an umbrella, but she decides she's on a metta retreat. She can't convert it to a weapon. And some rickshaw driver sees the attempted kidnapping and intervenes, and Sharon's safe. And she gets back to the retreat center, obviously shaken. And she tells the teacher how proud she was that she didn't beat the man. And the teacher says, next time this happens, I want you to beat the man with that umbrella with all the loving kindness you can muster. So one thing is, if all you're trying to do is like open your heart, there's this stupidity, this lack of safety. The other thing which I've seen before is what Ken Wilber calls the pre-trans fallacy. The idea that instead of having a healthy ego with good interpersonal boundaries, with good self-knowledge, you regress into this like infantile state where you don't have a good, like I have a little baby and he'll bite his hand because he doesn't know if it's his hand. Doesn't know where he ends and mom begins. It's possible to actually meditate yourself into that sort of a state. Maybe the third thing I'm thinking about is the more that one transcends the ego, the more like personality diversity there should be. Like, if you know long-term practitioners, most of us are like fucking weirdos. And that comes from getting in touch with the self, right? What I mean by self is I have all these qualities that just seem to be in there. They're quite different from your qualities. And as we meditate more in the right way, meaning you can feel your emotions, you can feel your motivations, you and I are actually going to become more different from each other. Meditating in this wrong way, where you are ignoring all of those things, we're both going to trend towards the same kind of sterile, boring outcome. There'd be a decrease in diversity.
How do you square the diversity with the idea of becoming a nobody? Is that because nobody almost sounds like there's only one kind of nobody, which is nothing, but the image you're painting is more diverse. Like there's all these different types of nobodies.
Yeah, so you can't stay nobody. Maybe if you're a monk with no life and minimal need for food and toilet, you could stay nobody. Lay people can't, right? You can transcend the ego, but it's going to come right back no matter how deep of a state of transcendence or cessation you enter into. You're going to be wearing the same outfit when you come out of it. When you leave the room, people are going to say, "Hi, Daniel." They're not going to say, "Hi, nobody."
Mm.
They're not going to fail to see you. They're not going to use a different name. Um, when you come out of being nobody, you're more or less exactly who you were before you went in. There can be these long afterglows, particularly when you're new at transcendence, where you will feel quite changed for a while. These things almost always regress. And many of your psychological pros and cons in the long run remain pretty untouched by transcendence. So you can be nobody, but you'll go right back to being Daniel again. And in terms of being a good Daniel or a good nobody, the first one's a lot more important.
Mm. And that is in the realm of therapeutic work, becoming a good version of yourself.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly can be. So, uh, in the book that I just wrote, Sanity and Sainthood, available now.
Yeah,
In
congrats, by
act
the
now,
way.
and
It's
we'll
a
throw in.
bestseller.
Thank you. Yeah, it hit number one new Buddhist book the day it came out. It unseated Marie Kondo.
There we go.
More famous than me. Um, um, in my book, I repeat the same sentence a bunch of times, which is to focus on mental processes when you can and mental content when you have to.
Mm.
So Dharma it's an overstatement, but Dharma is mostly about focusing on mental process. So if you have a traditionally trained Dharma teacher and you go into an interview and what's coming up in your meditation is childhood memories and you start talking about those, they're going to politely or impolitely tell you to shut up, right? Like, and this is the advice the Buddha gives. The Buddha says something like, do not say he robbed me, he beat me, he abused me. Somebody who says these things is already the property of Mara, the property of Satan, you know? Imagine your psychologist, you say you're abused and they say, don't even say that. You're the devil's plaything for even saying that. It's really quite the opposite, right? In Dharma, you're trying to notice not what the thoughts are about. You're trying to largely, most of the time, ignore what the thoughts are about and notice how they're arising, what your relationship is to them. Whereas the therapeutic path is entirely about what's arising. One reason the Dharma path is about ignoring content is the idea that the content can't ultimately be fixed. You can't make your mind work as well as you want it to. It's always going to be, to some degree, disappointing. And so screw it, right? The therapeutic approach is like, sure, nobody has a great definition of mental health. You probably won't make your mind work precisely how you want it to, but you can make it work an awful lot better. The original title of my book was Draining the Pond, and I got rid of it partly because it sounded like a 2016 Trump slogan, and also because I love ponds, and I didn't want to write a book about how to have fewer of them in the world. But the idea, the metaphor is the work of psychotherapy, the work of addressing and improving the content, feels like draining a pond with a bucket. It's like very slow going work. There's just no way to tell how deep the pond is. The only thing you can say is it's quite deep. But like over time, it really does get shallower, and that's amazing. I've gotten as much mileage out of therapy and coaching and working directly with the content as I have out of transcending the content, mindfulness, equanimity, not caring about the content.
Okay, so you're in a unique position to reflect on like a bunch of different therapeutic modalities from both these angles. So I thought something that might be fun to do is I'll just list a bunch that people seem to find popular, that come up a lot, and stuff that I'm personally curious about, and then you can say like overrated or underrated.
Okay.
And
I
then
love games, so I'll give it a shot. Most of the research on psychotherapy says that the technique doesn't really matter. The R square, the amount of variance attributable to what technique you're using, at least when I last saw the research, it was between 1 and 9%. Almost all of the outcomes not technique related. But okay, I'll bite.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm just going to go through them. And then if you have like an interesting take on any of them, then we can dig deep. But first, IFS, overrated, underrated.
I knew that was going to be number one. I'm going to say, I know that this wasn't an option, but I'm going to say accurately rated.
Accurately rated.
It's hugely trending right now. It's what everybody's saying is the thing, and it's as good as everybody says it is.
Okay, that's good. Jhanas.
Complicated. I could riff on that for a while, or we could keep going.
Tell me why it's complicated.
In the Buddhist path, jhanas have a few points. One is switching your addictions. Mm-hmm. So instead of being addicted to food or sex or whatever the average person's addicted to get pleasure, you get addicted to jhana, which is more wholesome. Jhanas also are supposed to suppress the hindrances. The average modern practitioner, at least that I work with, the problem is excess striving. For most people, it's going to take 2 to 3 years and like maybe 30 days of retreat to get any handle on you're meditating the wrong way. You're pushing the mind too hard. Most of my students are very successful people. And the kind of mental movements that make you successful in the world are disastrous in meditation, right? You have to stop them. And it's really hard to stop them when for decades they've done everything you wanted them to do. And jhana is a totally like binary success-based, you're doing it or you're not doing it. And no matter how much the teacher might say, look, it's not about getting jhana, very few people are going to believe them.
I see.
They're going to see a wink. And so, yeah, I think one issue is jhana is about striving. And unless you've spent quite a few years getting your striving under control, trying to get jhana is going to make your practice a lot worse. Also, in Buddhism, we're taught that jhana as an end goal is a failure. So the Buddha learned the jhanas predate recorded history, right? No one knows how old they are. In the oldest texts we have, people already doing jhana practice. The Buddha learned the first 7 jhanas from one teacher, the 8th jhana from another teacher, and says, this is not where it's at. So in Buddhism, the jhanas have a role for most people in the practice, but the modern idea of jhanas as an end in themselves that beginners should do to feel awesome all the time, I think has more cons than pros.
Yeah. Okay. I really like that. I really like that take. I'm going to resist the urge to go down the jhana path because I want to go through these others. Core transformation, overrated, underrated.
Oh, I haven't done a lot of that. Core transformations where you keep questioning the complex, you ask it what or why or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's kind of the same as IFS. It's just a trick for doing
it. It came up in my conversation with Romeo, and it just seemed like at least to me, a more intuitive approach and something that you could kind of learn how to do yourself more easily. And so I'm kind of like excited about it. Okay. This is something I know you have experience with: motivational interviewing.
Oh yeah, I teach a course in motivational interviewing. I always start the course by saying I have 2 religions: Theravada Buddhism and motivational interviewing. Could not rate that one highly enough.
Okay, let's jump into this one because this is something that I heard about years ago, more in the context of like coaching and sales, but it turns out to be way deeper than I thought. So maybe you can tell the listeners why it's one of your religions and what it is.
Yeah. The motivational interviewing is listening is something very few people can naturally do. For most of us, listening takes training.
Mm.
In motivational interviewing, original sin is the writing response. So if I tell you I have 15 drinks a day, you're going to say, hey, that's too many. Like the DSM here says you are an alcoholic and you really need to seek treatment. And I've heard that before, right? By the way, I don't drink. This is just an example. But so I always start my class with the same example, which is a man comes in and says, my fucking wife made me come here. I have 30 drinks a day, but you know what? My neighbor has 40 and I don't see anybody making him go to see a therapist. And I go to work and I pay the bills and I don't know what she's complaining about. And so obviously, if I tell this man you're an alcoholic and you need help, he's going to see me as a jerk. He's going to see me as part of the system that's opposed to him. He's probably going to smile and nod, agree to do everything I say, leave the room, and never talk to me again. What I want to do is make this man feel heard. And so what I want to do is repeat back to him what he said. But I have an awful lot of leeway in how I can repeat back to him what he said, where he will agree that's exactly what he said. So I could say, hey, it sounds like you are really happy with your lifestyle and there's no real reason for you to be in this appointment. And I know that when I say that, he'll say that's correct. He'll give me sustained talk. I shouldn't make any changes. I can also say, it sounds like you're pretty comfortable with your drinking and your wife's pretty uncomfortable with your drinking. He'll 100% agree. That's exactly what he said. And he'll now talk about how his wife is uncomfortable. So MI is described by the authors as a dance, where you can do a dance step. I can pull him towards the you should drink less, but I can't pull him too far or I knock him over. I also can't stand still, that form of therapy where I take the thing you said, repeat it, but make my voice go up at the end. That will very quickly become a worthless circle. So MI is client-centered, but it's directive, meaning in the case where I know the solution to your problem, as in like an alcoholic should stop drinking, I know that one, right? If your parents dislike your fiance and you don't know what to do, I don't know whether you should go with your parents or your fiance, but in these cases where I do know the right answer, I can direct you there without making you feel like I think I'm smarter than you.
And so the basic move there is to find the way to rephrase something that they would agree with in a way that's like slightly oriented towards the direction you want to take them in.
Yeah. So the premise is client will give you sustained talk, meaning I should not change, and change talk, meaning I should do something differently. And what you practice there are different phases of MI. The real artistic phase is getting people from ambivalence, meaning they're giving you both change and sustained talk, to giving you consistent change talk. And the way that you respond to them can program increase change talk or increase sustained talk, but it requires ambivalence on the client's part, right? So I always get this question in the first class, can this be used for evil or something? And kind of not really. Like, I couldn't convince you to burn down your neighbor's house because you're not ambivalent on that topic.
Do you have an example of taking some, like in that example you just gave, can you describe a situation where someone would go from sustained to change?
Oh, sure. You mean sustained talk to change talk, or to actually being? Oh, sure. I just did. So, in that example, when I say it sounds like you're upset, you're fine with your drinking, but your wife's pretty upset about it. What he's going to start doing is talking about his wife, and probably, I mean, it might be that he says, I hate her and I'm glad to be tormenting her with my drinking, but most people don't talk that way, right? If I can get him talking about his wife, he's probably going to talk about either situational constraints. She really doesn't like this, it's causing problems. Or the deepest thing you can get people to talk about is values. So he might say, like, I love my wife and I care about her and I enjoy the drinking. I don't want to stop, but I don't want to hurt my wife. The deepest thing you can hit on is getting people to talk about values and noticing the way that their behavior is out of sync with their values.
Cool. Last question on MI. Why is it one of your religions? I know you said that facetiously, but this is obviously something that you find important and useful. So maybe riff on that.
It's not that facetious. Like people will say to me, "Do you do this on your husband?" And I'm like, "This is just the way I like. This is who I am now. I do it on everybody." As the motivational interviewing textbooks have gotten new editions, the textbooks get progressively more like spiritual sounding. The most recent edition, the authors almost seem like they have stumbled onto this like revealed knowledge rather than invented a therapeutic modality. It rests on the framework that people are strong, people are smart, people are smarter about their own lives than you are about their lives. And all you have to do is help people access the wisdom that already exists within them. So the MI book's written by a guy called Bill Miller. His PhD advisor was Hal Arkowitz. Hal was my postdoc advisor. So I got this like very high pedigree of MI training. And when I was doing my postdoc, I was working with a lot of homeless people. And I grew up upper middle class. I don't know how to be homeless. And this was a really challenging job until I started training MI. And I was like, oh, I don't even know how to be homeless. These folks are great at being homeless. Like they've been homeless for a while. They know how to do it. I can actually like help bring this wisdom to the forefront. And that's sort of the religion aspect is like people are smart, people are strong, and people are good at living their own lives in a way that I'm not. And I can trust them and I can talk in a way where I don't have to be the expert. I can help. I can just like help people be their own experts. It's a like beautiful religion, and it's very relaxing. It's pretty stressful to have to figure out how to be homeless, how to be addicted to meth, how to be a veteran with PTSD, and I don't figure any of those things out anymore.
So you act more as a mirror.
Midwife is the image that's coming to mind.
One thing I wanted to ask you is, what are your thoughts on emotional processing and different therapeutic modalities for processing, releasing, like knowing your emotions, and how do we know that we're doing it correctly?
Yeah, so this is there keeps being this thing where Silicon Valley culture takes something very old, gives it a new name, and pretends they've invented it. Yeah. Emotional processing is catharsis. Like yes. Freud was writing papers on this before your great grandmother was born. So it's a very old concept. The idea is getting in touch with emotions and feeling them, and then they decrease. It's like massage. You take something that's been a dull, aching pain for a long time, push on it, make it feel a lot worse, and then it releases. It feels better. Yeah, this is an absolutely great thing to do. How do you know if you're doing it right? In a particular moment, it might be hard to know whether you're doing it right. What you're looking for over time is the emotion, like, because the catharsis can take, particularly if you're in an intensive setting, if you're on a retreat or like a weekend workshop or something, the emotions can take hours to pass through, and those hours can be really distressing. The emotion should be getting lighter, and you should care about it less. One way to be doing it wrong would be to get more like obsessed with the emotion. Your story around how the emotion describes you is getting stronger. The other way to do it wrong would be the original meaning of the word rumination is what a cow does with its cud. You chew it, swallow it, puke it, chew it, swallow it, puke it. If nothing's happening, if it's just the same cycle going over and over, in that case, you probably need intervention. You need a therapist or coach is a pretty undefined term that encompasses a lot of narcissists who've declared themselves good at life,
right.
But also some very skilled people. But yeah, if it's just going in circles, you probably need intervention.
So part of the reason why I'm curious about this is it almost suggests that there's an inbox, that maybe you've built up over a certain amount of years of life, and that you can, get through it or get to a sufficient level of emotional processing, like process the inbox. And so there's almost like a direction to it, or it almost feels like a video game, like just go deeper and deeper and process more emotions. And some of the ways people describe it sounds like that. But I imagine that if your concepts about, or your approach to processing your emotions are confused on some level, then it can do some harm. So I want to hear if you resonate with that description, or if you were to disambiguate any misconceptions here, what might you say?
Yeah. So I was giving this Dharma talk for a while, which it had a title. They don't usually have titles, but this one did. The title is "Optimization is the Sin of the God Realms."
Mm.
The idea of the God Realms is someplace where a lot of us in the middle to upper class of first world live. So in Buddhist God Realms, you do die. There is war, but there's not like war very often. You don't die for a long time. You have a lot of control over your environment. And for a lot of people I know, this does describe, I know plenty of people in their 30s who have never been to a funeral.
Mm.
And so because in the God realms, things are so good, you just keep trying to make them better in a way that becomes the worst thing in your whole life.
Mm.
So you can get the pond lower, right? So feeling your emotions, interacting with content, going into them rather than away from them with mindfulness and equanimity, that's content. That's draining the pond. You probably can't drain the pond. If you keep going with emotional stuff, at some point it gets weirder, like you start experiencing contentless emotion. You actually start experiencing memories and traumas that did not happen to you.
Mm.
It gets weirder, but you can't drain it, right? And so the one really easy way to go wrong is its compulsion to just feel emotions and feel it and feel it and feel it and feel it until one day you're happy. And actually what you should do is feel it until you're like balanced and stable enough to put up with how you live next to a pond.
Mm.
Have a good sense of humor about living next to a pond.
Mm.
That's the process when you can, content when you have to, or the interplay between the somebody and nobody paths.
This is really good. You mentioned everyone's doing some amount of spiritual bypassing, and this feels like kind of relevant. So, first, like, what is your definition of spiritual bypassing? And then how do I know that I've actually hit that point where I have a good sense of humor around my emotions, or I'm actually just spiritual bypassing?
So spiritual bypassing is the path of being nobody in order to ignore the path of being somebody.
Mm.
So these are people who tell you there are arhats and can't stop holding a grudge, explode in anger. In my circle of Dharma teachers, one of our mantras is, "We do not negotiate with arhats." So it's ignoring all of your personality flaws and moral flaws by going into emptiness. I think this is a big part of why there's so many phenomenal moral failings among supposedly spiritual masters at way higher levels of moral failing than average people are capable of having. How do you know if you're doing it? I would only worry about doing it in the extreme. I would only worry about doing it in the extreme if you think of like 10 is being totally involved in your emotions, reactive to everything, and 0 is being so dissociated you have no idea what's going on. It doesn't take much math to know that you're supposed to be at a 5. That's the balance point. 5's a really fine balance point. You can't stay there, right? So I like to think like if you're in the 3 to 7 realm, 2 thumbs up, you're doing great. So some degree of this spiritual bypassing is necessary, and I wouldn't worry about it too much. It will just make you paranoid.
Right.
Every time you feel good or have a great meditative experience, you run into the teacher being like, what am I doing wrong? I'm happy. Can you please help me be miserable so I know that I'm doing the path correctly? Um, Ways you know there's a problem, I think there's two. One is behavioral issues, and very few of us will have to wait until we've like seduced 15 of our students and created a giant scandal, right? Behavioral issues are going to be like you feel like a very enlightened person and you're shouting at your spouse, like, duh, you're missing something, right? The other one is this flatness. Uh, it I had a student years ago call and was like, I think I might be enlightened. Like, I'm not reactive to anything. I'm not looking forward to anything. And I'm like, are you enlightened or are you depressed?
Right.
and the answer was the second one, right?
Damn.
Life, if your life is reasonably good, you should feel reasonably good. Life should be delicious, right? If there are people you love that should feel delicious, if you are able to do things you enjoy that should feel delicious. And this root of spiritual bypassing is like it's dissociation, right? It's cultivating not knowing what you're feeling. Almost everything that makes life good and worth living is a feeling, right? Love, meaning, passion, connection, enjoyment. These are all feelings. And if you're ignoring your feelings, I say, hey, why do you hope you can be 100 years old? And it's like, I don't know, somebody's got to feed my cat. I don't know how else to do it. That's the other way you can notice spiritual bypassing.
Yeah, I'm gonna like ask another specific question, and this is a personal one. This is something I care about. You might have the exact same answer to it, but it's like basically, how can I tell if I'm repressing my emotions or I just don't have that much to process?
You can't. Repression is definitionally an unconscious process. So ultimately, there's no great way to answer that. The best thing you can do is make sure that your body clarity is high. The Pali term is sampajana, clear comprehension. The Buddha usually uses sati sampajana as a compound word, mindfulness and clear comprehension. Mindfulness of the body in the body is the first foundation of mindfulness, right? So without training, at least for most Western or globalized people, emotions are ethereal. Like if you say you're sad and I say where, you'll think I don't understand English, right? That question doesn't make sense. With practice, emotions become primarily a physical experience. And so what you're trying to do is just get the body really sensitive. You're not looking for repressed emotions necessarily. You're not trying to figure out whether you've secretly had a terrible childhood. That's paranoia. You're actually just trying to get your body sense clarity high. And if I ask you to write me a paragraph about how your left hand feels different from your right hand, the top of your foot feels different from the bottom of your foot, you might be able to write that paragraph. Or you might say, only one paragraph? How am I going to keep it that short? With body clarity, you can feel trauma and negative emotions easily. It feels like crunching, contraction, pain, blackness, opacity, and then positive emotions are the polar opposite: expansion, luminosity, warmth, transparency.
That's really good practical advice. I like that a lot. Okay, so why is it that sometimes you can almost tell that these feelings or thoughts are coming from different parts of the body? A classic example is sometimes thoughts feel like they're in your head, but then sometimes they feel like they're in your chest, or they're in your like root or in your gut. What's going on there?
Yeah, I was freezing up because your question was why, and I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like if somebody said something mean to you when you were 7, you can go on a meditation retreat when you're 40 and cry for a week, And if you look out the window at the squirrels, if they got chased by a coyote yesterday, they're just back to like trying to mate with other squirrels and hide acorns, right?
Mm.
I have no idea why human psychology functions in this way, where it just stores everything. Uh, that makes no sense to me. It seems like a real design flaw.
Yeah.
Um, and yet, it does seem to be the case that the mind is tremendously disintegrated, right? uh, do you do you know what happens if your brain is cut in half?
Like you snip the left and right hemisphere, the
You,
corpus
you,
callosum.
snip, you snip the corpus callosum. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I've seen some of the studies, but maybe you can tell listeners.
Oh, yeah. So in a laboratory setting, you can make somebody with a split brain do weird things. In daily life, you actually wouldn't notice that your brain had been cut in half.
Mm.
It would function about the same as it functions now. Your your brain is quite disintegrated. We know now that there's neurons outside the brain. There's neurons in the gut. Um, Consciousness seems to be composed of different parts. This is why I'm so into IFS. It's composed of different parts. They seem to have almost nothing in common, and they seem to reside in different regions of the body. For the most part, the head is where rationality is going to be. And rationality for most globalized people is a real vice when it comes to emotional healing. Like I was saying before, because it's so successful in navigating the outside world, it's really hard to ever stop doing it. But it's keeping emotions suppressed. It's telling them they're wrong, they're primitive. Uh, for the most part, emotions are going to be below the neck. And it's part of why I say if you want to make sure you're not repressing things, the best thing you can do is get your body sharp. It will tell you. And you'll usually notice when you are in the body, the vocabulary becomes really limited. It's like a word or two, whereas when you're in the head, it's writing essays.
And I know some people are going to wonder about this, but what is the practice for improving body clarity other than just bringing your awareness into body sensations?
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
The practice is just feel the body. You want to feel it at a medium lens of analysis, meaning like, what does your foot feel like? What does your chest feel like? Or the top of your chest or whatever. It should be a medium lens, and it should be anatomically sensible. If you do like the Goenka practice where you're looking for tiny little things and moving, that's the path of nothing. You dissolve the body very quickly, and you'll lose any kind of emotional content. It exists at the medium level.
That's a good tip.
The other thing you can do is look for subtleties, meaning like you can certainly feel your breath in your hips, right? Like your pants get tighter when you breathe in, looser when you breathe out. Okay, can you go a couple inches, a couple centimeters down your leg? Is the breath there? So looking, same on your shoulders, going down your arms. Looking for the edges of the breath is subtle. Looking for clothing gradations. Can you feel where your underwear start? Can you feel where your cuff starts? Looking for these subtle things can sharpen perception, but over time, it's really just going to be looking. On a scale of about 3 weeks, it should be clear that there's more sensation than there used to be. And that's really all you're looking for is more.
Earlier, you mentioned Freud writing about catharsis. And I had a question here about sublimation. I've heard this experience before, and I think I've had my own version of this where after meditating, you might notice what like sexual energy or libido is prior to sexual content. Yeah. So, and it's like this generalized, like vital energy in the body. And
that's right.
I've always wondered, Freud talks about sublimating sexual energy, and then, you know, maybe you abstain from sex, but you like compose better music or something like that. I wonder, as an advanced meditator, what's the actual skill of channeling this energy?
Yeah, I'm just a pretty manic person by nature. So for me, it doesn't feel all that limited. It's not like, I mean, I'm married, I'm not celibate, right? It's not like if I have sex, I suck at the guitar now or something. Um, the libidinal energy is something you find generally around the area where your belt buckle would be, seems to be the epicenter of it, although it can radiate along your waist. Yeah, usually it is, particularly when you're younger, it's merged with sex objects. What you can do, like the energy shows up and you get horny or you find somebody really attractive. If you can just feel the energy, which is a practice in a lot of different traditions. I did a Tai Chi retreat one time, and almost the whole thing is like, moving your hands back and forth around your belt buckle and trying to sense the energy there. Uh, I've found three general types of ways to direct the energy. Obviously, sex. Another is generativity. Like you can take this energy and go build something or create something. And the third is affiliation.
Hmm.
You can quite platonically use the energy to like uh, play with little kids, hang out with your grandparents. You can redirect it towards like entirely platonic human. I guess not necessarily human. You can play with puppies. Yeah, you can direct it towards affiliative pursuits as well. Uh, yeah, I haven't talked to enough people to get a sense of like, do some people find it more limited where like if you have sex you don't want to play with puppies or write books or something?
Let's take the example of generative stuff like building something. Let's say somebody actually has an art project of some kind and maybe they're not giving it enough energy. What would they do other than becoming aware, maybe in the same way you described, like the body awareness of like that energy around the belt? What is the move to bring it to the art project?
um so when you try to get in touch with vital energies, this happens in jhana practice as well. One very common thing that will happen is you notice all the blockages to the energy.
Mm.
When people first start studying with me, I don't know why, but most of my students around the world are techies. I'm not. I have no connection with that, so I don't know why all my students are. Um, but oh, I got lost. I'll be right back. Um, right. Most of my students are techies, and so they come in with this completely materialist, rationalist worldview.
Mm.
And if I start talking about energy, they're going to get really turned off and complain behind my back and use the word epistemics in a negative sense. And within like 6 months, everybody has their ayahuasquero texting their Reiki master about the direction that their chakras are rotating.
Mm.
If you sit quietly for not all that long, you start feeling energy in the body. And I don't know what it is. Scientific instruments don't measure it, but like it's the loudest sensation I get when I observe my body. And so I want to be able to talk about it. And the energy seems to flow like a river. And for most of us, it's blocked in places. And the same way that if you have like a dam and a river and there's not much water, there's going to be like, it's going to be gross, right? There's going to be algae and leeches and stuff behind the dam. But it's not violent. It's when you open the floodgate that the side of the dam becomes violent, right?
Mm.
This is very much what it feels like when you do a practice to put more energy in the body. So this can be trying to get into the first jhana. This can be trying to feel the lower dantian is the Chinese term for the place by your belt buckle. So yeah, generally the practice would be see if you can feel it. That will cause you to notice why the energy is not flowing clearly. Then there are lots of ways to work through energy blocks, either in a physical way or in a mental way. The physical and mental are two sides of the same phenomena. As a general principle, working with the blockages in a body way is better, is more efficient. Your thoughts are constantly lying to you and tricking you. They're like a disinformation machine. Your body is honest, but some of the complexes are too big, and like the body exit is not large enough for them. So if things get really stuck, then you want to look at the energy blockages through a mind gate.
And when you say working through the body, is that like getting massage, or is that what sort of things are?
Oh, it's in lots of things. It can be getting massage, it can be doing yoga, getting acupuncture, tai chi. It can just be energetic, like attentional practices
Yeah.
of, if there's a block in your chest, hang out there and see what it does, see if you can move it. Um, Most cultures, unlike our largely globalized culture, most cultures validate the idea that there's energy moving through the body and have developed techniques for healing it. Reiki, different shamanic techniques. There's lots and lots of
Mm-hmm.
ideas people have come up with for healing body blockages.
And then on the attentional front, is it any different from what you described earlier of bringing sensory clarity to the body?
Uh, yeah, sometimes. So there's if the blockage is presenting as physical and you can't seem to heal it physically, so the first thing you can do is just bring attention there and see what happens. Sometimes nothing. It just feels painful and awful, and day after day, week after week, it's just stuck. In that case, you want to try converting it to mental content. You may need help with that, as in, therapy, coaching. The way to convert it to mental content, the way to convert it to mental content is to listen, to try to see what is the block about and can you heal it. This is where something like IFS can be one of the modalities.
The thing I was getting at more though is, earlier we talked about how instead of trying to process emotions, you just increase the sensory clarity of your body, and then once you're better at that, then the body will show emotions. Will it also, is that exactly the same thing as tuning into the energy of the body, or is there a slightly different practice there?
Yeah, it's the same thing. So the practice you're trying to do is just turn up the volume.
Yeah.
You absolutely do not have to believe in energy.
Mm-hmm.
Very few people that I work with do come in believing that this exists. All you have to do is look closely. And for most people, one of the things you'll see when you look closely is what feels like energy currents.
Speaking of things that people have difficulty believing, what's your take on CDs or powers, and what are some of the clearest examples of them that you've witnessed?
The Buddhist take on siddhis is that they are real and you really shouldn't talk about them. In the Buddhist mythology, there's two Satan characters. Mara is the tempter, the lord of evil, and Devadatta is the fallen angel archetype. And Devadatta's whole practice is just cultivating magic powers. The reason that you're advised not to talk about them is they're just a huge distraction. They're really like the opposite of the spiritual path. The spiritual path should be about clear comprehension, mindfulness, and ultimately letting go. If you listen to the show and hear that you can astrally project or do telepathy and start trying to do that, this is grasping, craving, trying to get better at playing a game you're supposed to stop playing. So this is why the Buddhist angle is, don't talk about these things. They're bad for you. And I've spent a lot of time in the Native American church when I used to live in Arizona, and it's the same thing there. They do a lot more accessing of altered, more kind of magic sorts of realms. And it's the same thing there, even where they're trying to access these realms, is like all this magic stuff is bad for you. Pretend you haven't observed it and don't mention it to anybody.
So maybe I should edit this part out of the conversation.
I don't mind if you leave in me telling everybody not to talk about it.
Yeah. As we come to a close, I wonder if there's anything you would just like to leave the listeners with. Like, it could be words of wisdom. It could be plugging your book again. just give you the last word.
Have I plugged my book yet?
Oh, you mentioned it. We mentioned in the beginning. We didn't like do an overt plug about it.
Do you want to plug it?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So this just came out. I was at the launch, Sanity and Sainthood, Integrating Meditation and Psychotherapy. And you just beat Marie Kondo on Amazon. So I'm still in the process of reading it, but maybe you can say this Sanity and Sainthood thing, I feel like this has to do with your definition of meditation. And maybe this could be actually like a good place to close the conversation. What is meditation to you?
Well, meditation is using different ways of looking at, using non-automatic ways of looking at sensory experience. And that's probably how I would define it. All we do all the time is look at sensory experience, but we tend to look at it in one automatic, pre-programmed sort of way. Meditation's using any other way of looking at sense experience. Where the book title comes from was partly, as I said, a rejection of Draining the Pond as an appropriate book title. But Sanity and Sainthood to me are the goals of psychotherapy and meditation. Sanity I'm defining as, the psych term is euthymia. It's like appropriate reaction. So very few people are naturally sane. If you are euthymic and you have a good life, you would be happy most of the time. And most of the people I know spend much of their day reacting to things that are not currently happening, such that you can have a very good life and be quite miserable because you're not responding to your good life. And then the flip side is you might be so kind of flat inside that something terrible happens and you can't feel it, right? So you should be sad when your uncle dies and happy that you get to play outside on a beautiful day. And for most people, it's not that way. The attention is constantly drifting into the fictional, and there's really little correlation between how your life is going and how you feel. So getting more in touch with your body, more in touch with your emotions, and getting more control over your attention should lead down the path to sanity. I put sainthood as the goal of meditation because I do believe that there are bad people in the world, people who can be very clear that they're hurting others and disrespecting the rights of others and don't care. But I think they're really few and far between. I think most of us, if I say, like, do you want to be a good human? Do you want to treat others well? Do you want your eulogy to be, he was a great guy who cared about everyone, stood up for them, made them feel better? I almost everybody I know is going to check that box, you know? And everybody I know is sometimes failing at that, is sometimes mistreating the people we love and acting in minor immoral ways. And so I asked the question, why, right? Like, if I want to act in this way, but I'm acting that way, what's going on? And it's imperfections, right? It's inability to see my true motivations, failure of mindfulness, failure of equanimity. And so I think if you could see what's going on in your mind really clearly, if you could treat it with mindfulness and equanimity, you would be able to act on your values all the time. And if, like most people, your values are good, it's not that like we'd all vote the same way and there'd be no disagreements, but at least from a values perspective, we'd probably all be more or less in agreement. And this is how I think of sainthood, being a really good person. People who do seem saintly seem to be able to quickly connect on topics of how to treat other humans. And so that's what I think of as a goal. It's similar to the bodhisattva path in Buddhism. The point isn't just to feel awesome. That's a pretty low goal. The point's to be a really good human.
And you can find this on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Wherever books are sold.
Tucker, thank you so much for this conversation today. I got a lot from it.
This was awesome, Daniel.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me.